Nice to meet. Finally. Now, in your book Lesson Complete, you say that in regards to consciousness outside the body, which is something that lots of people think about, speculate about, and maybe sense that might be can exist outside the body. You say you felt very cool that there's a big part of your life purpose to educate people about this, to study about this. I just wondered sort of how did this become your calling, and how did you end up studying it as in-depthly as you have?
Yes, it's a good question. Thank you. I think first it's important that I define what I mean when I use the term consciousness. So I use it as a synonym of soul or spirit or self. So in other words, I'm a consciousness, you, Ben, are a consciousness. We're all human consciousnesses. So yes, the book is about the life of the consciousness beyond the body, but also in the body. And the book describes the overall story of the consciousness. So I'm looking at the series of successive lives that we undergo as a consciousness. So I'm talking here about past lives, future lives, and also periods in between two physical lives. I look at how the consciousness evolves over these many lives, how it matures and grows. I look at the relationships that we have with the people around us, also from a multi-dimensional, multi-serial perspective, and so on. And so when I first learned about these things, and also started having my own experiences of non-physical realities, past lives and so on, I really had to face one big question, which was, if I've had many lives already, and I have many more lives to come in the future, what then is the point of this particular life? What is the goal? What is the mission? What am I doing in this particular life? Am I just here to repeat the same sorts of things that I've done already in previous lives? Because Ben, we humans tend to be creatures of habit.
Yeah.
Or do I have some other purpose in this particular life? And for me, it became clear that I do, and that my purpose is to use whatever means that I have, my time, my energy, my communication skills, whatever it might be, to help the people who are looking for this information to bring some similar kind of sense to their lives. So this is why I started volunteering with the organisations associated with Dr. Vieira's work, and still do today, nearly 20 years later.
Lovely. And if you don't mind me asking, did you have personal experience, what people would call, higher conscious or experiences or peak experiences, which facilitated that realisation? That opened you up a bit in that respect?
No, it was. It wasn't anything particularly remarkable or outstanding. It definitely wasn't a big bang moment. It was really more the study that we do, because these associations, organisations associated with Dr. Vieira's work, many of them offer educational activities. And we have tips and techniques and methodologies for helping people to identify their life's purpose. And so it was simply a matter of going through that. And for me, it was a very clear realisation that I had quite early on, I guess I could say.
Lovely. And of course, like today, looking for purpose, and there's a lot of sort of confusion. Lots of people are searching for kind of that greater context and that greater purpose at the moment, I'd say.
Yes.
And so conscientiology, which is the kind of the science started by Dr. Vieira, which is your focus, and you just said, in working with conscientiology, there's lots of practices and exercises that it teaches and that it works with to help people understand themselves as a consciousness and understand their purpose. Could you say something a little bit about what is conscientiology ultimately, and sort of, I guess, how does it differ from the other kind of metaphysical things that you might hear talk about similar issues?
Yes. So firstly, to explain in a bit more detail what conscientiology is, it's the study of the consciousness. So terms that we're familiar with, soul or spirit. That's what I'm talking about. But we take into account things like the properties of the consciousness, its capacities, its phenomena, its lives, and its bodies. So let me just give you a few examples to explain this in a bit more detail. So if we're talking about the bodies of the consciousness, there are four: the physical body, the energy body, the astral or non-physical body, and the mental body. And then when we break those down and we look at the properties of each of the bodies. So, for example, if we look at the non-physical body, we know that it's almost weightless. It's invisible to the human eye. It can be luminous, meaning it emits its own light. It can stretch itself. It can transform itself into any shape it wants, and it can pass through physical objects. Just to give you some examples.
Yeah.
What about the mental body? We know that the mental body has no shape or form at all. There is nothing to see. We know that it can communicate by giving and receiving huge chunks of information in one go. So, for example, if we were having this conversation and we were both manifesting in the mental body, I could transmit all of the information of this interview to you in this one chat, if you like. What about the energy body? We know when the consciousness is outside of the body, the energy body extends into a silver cord that keeps the astral body connected to the physical body. We know that the energy body can't transport the consciousness in the way that the other bodies do. We also know that in the case of the human consciousness, our energy body is infused with our thoughts, emotions, intentions, ideas, sentiments, and so on. If we look at the phenomena of the consciousness, the OBE is one phenomena, but there are others. Clairvoyance, telepathy, retrocognitions, in which you recall a past life, premonitions, intuition, the ability to communicate with other consciousnesses across the dimensions, the ability to perceive consciousnesses in other dimensions. So those are just some of the phenomena of the consciousness. If we look at the lives of the consciousness, we can study our past lives, but also our past periods in between two physical lives, and also our future lives. And then when thinking about the attributes of the consciousness, as I mentioned earlier, we know that the consciousness, it evolves over time. So over the period of successive lives, we become more mature. We accumulate and gain knowledge on different topics. We develop new capacities, and hopefully we can overcome some weak traits along the way. So I've just mentioned a few examples here to give you a flavour of the field of conscientiology. So the second part of the question you asked is what differentiates the approach of conscientiology from some other approaches. Conscientiology is science-based. So we're not looking at the topic from a mystical perspective or a religious perspective, but we're conducting research, and we have a proposal. What is our objective? What are we trying to understand here? We develop a methodology, and then we follow that methodology step by step to arrive at some conclusions.
Lovely. And I can feel from how you explain it, I can feel the rigorous scientific approach, because it's all about very clear ordering and compartmentalization language, but as focused and clear as you can possibly make it. Would you say that's right? Yes,
absolutely. But I think the other aspect that makes conscientiology different, and for me was so appealing as well, is that it's not just looking at the data that exists and delving into that. That's part of it, of course, but it's also conscientiology recognises the value of personal experience, which of course regular science does not take into account. And so then if you have, 5,000 people, 10,000, 50,000 people around the world having OBEs, coming back and saying the same thing about what they saw, what they experienced, what they felt, and so on, then there has to be something to that. So we look at that census of experience across, a large number of individuals, cross-reference that with the data that exists, and then arrive at some conclusions.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? It's not someone, Dr. Vieira standing up and proclaiming all of this. You're looking at the experience of many, 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 many people across the entire world, and filtering it and sort of digesting it and using it to create your map, really.
Indeed. And in fact, for us, what is most important is the direct personal experience. And in all of our activities, all of the organisations associated with doctors' work, they run to various principles and guidelines. But one very important one is the one that we call the principle of disbelief. Right. And what that means is we say to everybody, don't believe in anything, including what I'm telling you here today, what I write in my book, what I deliver in a lecture. Have your own experiences and decide for yourself what is the reality and what is not the reality. And we can provide you with some exercises, some tips, some techniques to help you to learn how to have those own experiences.
Lovely, yeah. So that's really important. It's not just you've got this very beautiful kind of map that you're making, but it, like you said, it's not, you're not just purely teaching on that intellectual level. You're encouraging people to find out for themselves.
Indeed.
So if I was someone who is sort of interested in this, or has a kind of vague sense that I'd like to know myself on that deeper level, if I'm feeling a bit at odds and I'd like to know my purpose a bit more clearly, I'd like to go here, and I wanted to work with someone like yourself or within the field of conscientiology, how would you recommend beginning, and what would you recommend the right approach would be?
Yes. I think the place to start is probably by reading some books. So my book summarises in an very accessible style 40 years of the research done by Dr. Vieira, and of course the many researchers who were working with him at his research centre at the Iguazu Falls in Brazil. Today there are several hundred people there, many professional people still having their regular lives, doctors, psychiatrists, administrators, teachers, scientists, geologists, whatever it may be, still continuing his work. Dr. Vieira actually died a couple of years ago now, but his work continues. So I guess it's a good place to start. And then across Europe, there are several of his organisations active in Europe in different countries. Here in France, for example, I volunteer today with an organisation, as you mentioned in the introduction, called Consecutivus. Our area of specialty is Syriaxology, past lives. And we hold various activities here in France. We're very accustomed to giving courses in different languages. We know we have to do that. In November of this year, interestingly, we have, I think now, 170 people already booked for a big course called Conscientiology Interact. It's going to be held in Strasbourg, here in France. It will be delivered in numerous languages. It's around 3 days of activities, courses, workshops, introductions, opportunities to network. And it's really open to people who have never had any contact with conscientiology before. In addition to, there are many of us here in Europe who've been volunteering for many years, and a lot of people coming from Brazil as well. So I think this would be a great place to start. But beyond that, as I said, a lot of the organisations, they all have their different areas of specialty, are giving activities across Europe. So if anyone is interested to know more, they can contact me by my Sandie Gustus author Facebook page, and I'm happy to point them in the right direction.
Lovely, and I'll make sure I put those links in the notes for our conversation as well. And so that sounds like, it's called Conscientiology Interact, is that right?
Yes.
And it sounds like the content, that sounds like a perfect place to start. The content would be a mixture of theory and practice, am I right? So exercises and theory, yeah.
Yes, exactly, and discussions and debates and so on.
Lovely, that sounds like an amazing meeting.
It will be, it's we're very focused today on trying to internationalize a lot of these organizations who, started in Brazil, so far don't have a very international footprint. And so we deliberately chose Strasbourg as a kind of neutral place in Europe. And we want to bring all of the energy of all of these people and their knowledge here to kind of establish ourselves energetically. And this was the idea, the way that we decided to start.
Yeah, lovely and great choice of location. So, I think lots of people, if someone's never studied conscientiology or worked with your kind of organization, I think even if they haven't, lots of people have a sense of I'm going to call it a consciousness experience. They might have seen something which they couldn't fully explain, or they might have felt like they left their body, or I know I've got a few friends who say when they were a child they spontaneously would have out of body experiences. And if lots of people, if if they're honest, they might not talk about it, but they might have had experiences like these. Do you have any kind of, I think when that happens, there's often going to be a lot of self-doubt, and did that really happen? And is this my imagination, and that kind of thing? Do you have sort of any, other than work, obviously coming and working with you guys, sort of any kind of pointers or guides to people, how they can distinguish these kind of experiences, what to look out for, how to trust themselves when it comes to this kind of thing?
Yes, yeah, sure, and going through our courses or even reading my book, all of this becomes very clear. So if I was to give just one example, people often ask me, okay, as you've just said, how do I differentiate, in fact, an out-of-body experience from a dream? It's a very good question. Why? Because we experience different levels of lucidity outside of the body in the same way that we experience different levels of lucidity inside of the body. So you can actually be out of the body, having a real OBE, but your lucidity is quite low. You are seeing things, you are interacting with people, but because your lucidity is less than what it is, in our normal waking state, when you wake up later, you recall that as a dream, for example.
Yeah. So
how do we know when we are having an OBE and it's not a dream? There are a few very clear pointers. There are, in fact, several sensations that you can experience as the non-physical body is detaching from the physical body. So some quite common ones are numbness. So the whole physical body goes numb, very common sensation. You can maybe experience what we call intracranial sounds. So at the exact moment of the detachment of the non-physical head from the physical head, you can hear some strange sounds that seem to come from inside of your head itself. You might feel a kind of pressure on the chest, which is quite commonly reported as well. So these are typical sensations that will allow you to know that the non-physical body is separating. Another real obvious one is when you're outside of the body, you're in control of that experience. So you decide where you want to go, what you want to do, and as soon as you make up your mind, bang, that happens. Whereas the dream, by contrast, it's a passive experience. Things happen to us, and they often seem nonsensical. But of course, the best way to know that you've had an out-of-body experience is while you're outside of the body, try to capture some information from the physical dimension that you can later corroborate when you return to the body. Yeah. An example I like to use is you can take a pack of cards, for example, before you lie down to try and have an experience. Shuffle the cards, pick one randomly, don't look at it, of course, stick it facing outwards from your bedroom window, wherever, with tack, and then your objective outside of the body is to try to go to the other side of the window and see what the card was. And there are all sorts of things you can do. You can ask a friend to leave an object on their dining room table, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Then you prove to yourself beyond any doubt that you're something more than just the physical body. And this is an experience that from that moment in time, you can never deny to yourself again.
Yeah. Life-changing. And then there's tons and tons of evidence that this has happened, hasn't it? People have seen something physical, and then come back and reported it, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. And there's really, really interesting medical research that's done, notably, in the UK, in intensive care units in hospitals, where people are more likely to have a near-death experience. Yeah. So, medical researchers are placing, symbols on pieces of cardboard on top of the heart monitors next to people's beds, and people are having near-death experiences, and the idea is that one day someone will return to the body and say, I saw a blue diamond shape on the top of my heart monitor. So it's a little bit tricky to conduct this kind of research, however, because the researchers don't want to say to people, hey, in the event that you happen to have a near-death experience, would you look on the... You can't really do that either. But this is the sort of research that's being conducted. Yeah. But aside from that, yes, there are, in Dr. Vieira's book, Projectiology, 1,200 pages, he lists the research, a lot of it done in the US, in which controlled experiments have taken place in labs monitoring people's heart rates, and they've identified times on clocks in different rooms and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I'm thinking that as you're speaking, the lovely precision, of what the things to look out for as you're leaving the body, the sensation in the head and the other sensations. If I was thinking, if I wanted to say learn how to have an out-of-body experience or to experiment, I'm thinking it would be really important to have a good teacher there, actually, and to help. And yes. I'm imagining it's something you offer and Conscientiology offers as a whole.
Yes.
And I would imagine that that's something you could that is part of what you do, that kind of teaching as well.
Yes. Absolutely. We teach. Look, Ben, all of this ability to have to experience paranormal phenomena and to control those phenomena and to learn from those, they all stem, in fact, from a person's ability to be able to control their energy. Yeah. It's the real key. If you can move your energy, move it up and down your body to create what we call a vibrational state. If you can exteriorize, send out your energy, absorb energy from nature, you start to unblock your own energy body. This is the body that's consisting of all of the chakras, and it's the real key to being able to experience a whole range of phenomena. So we focus a lot in all of our classes in this energy work, and my own experience as a student was, I do remember having some experiences with different things when I was a child, but apart from that, I would have said, look, no, not really. I didn't consider myself to have any psychic capacities at all. Yeah. And then when I started studying Conscientiology, going through the courses and working with my energy, things changed very quickly indeed.
Wow.
And things happen like you will start having intuitions, you will start receiving messages from the non-physical dimension via telepathy, many, many different things. And yes, as you said, I doubted everything in the beginning. But then in time, all of your intuitions, all of the communications you receive, bit by bit, you start to see, in fact, it was correct. They're validated. And so what happens over time is when you receive that information, that intuition, the communication, the telepathy, whatever it might be, you learn to trust it. And then you need to act on that. It is something indeed very real. So this is the journey, if you like. But it's fascinating because it opens up a whole new world. And you start to learn to understand who you have around you non-physically as well. What are the quality of those energies? Maybe, what is the nature of your relationship with them? Are you there to help them? Is there something you need to do to help them? Are they there to help you, for example? Certainly when I wrote my book, I was very aware of having more evolved consciousnesses with me from the beginning, and still today, just non-physical people associated with this particular project, this work that I'm doing. And to give an example, sometimes I've picked up my own book in the past and been reading through various chapters, and I've looked at something and thought, it's not at all like me to write something like that. It's much sharper than ordinarily I would be able to do. And so I'm aware that, I've been helped at certain moments, even with the writing process itself. So it's fascinating to open up your own experience of your reality in that way.
And that absolutely fascinating. And I think this is a really important point. You said with your experience, you didn't consider yourself psychic at all. Rodrigo, one of our other authors who wrote a book on conscientiology, Paravision, he didn't consider himself psychic at all. And it's not like you don't have to be some sort of known from when you were 4 that you were blessed with psychic ability. This is something that anybody can learn. And as you say, like it's an amazing journey because you gain an experience of your consciousness and intuition that probably you just had no idea that you could do before, and it kind of opens wide open.
Yes, and it becomes very fulfilling because you do have the opportunity to do things like identify in a clear way what your purpose in life is. I think a lot of us studying in conscientiology, because of that, have completely reprioritized our lives. And the focus is more on being able to take advantage of this particular physical life to evolve ourselves, overcome some weak traits, be a better person at the end of our lives than we were at the beginning, so as in the next life we're not just coming back repeating the same things, suffering from the same weaknesses and so on, but also very much using this life to help other people to do the same thing. I know Rodrigo, this is someone I hold in very high esteem indeed. He's been teaching conscientiology all around the world in 4 or 5 different languages for 25 years. He's still a young man himself, has incredible capacities, has written this book. When I think about how many people he has helped and many, many other colleagues, and it's very fulfilling. It's fulfilling as well, of course.
Lovely, yeah, and I can feel, that sort of sense of that meaning that you get from that, from the helping and the evolving. And would you say it's fair to say, that kind of underlying the conscientiology is that idea that we're always learning, and there's one element of life which is like a kind of I don't like the word school, but it's like you're here to learn, and what's happening to you is asking you to learn certain things.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head, and there's no expiry date. I hope I'll still be learning well into my 90s,
Yeah.
and the idea is to to have the curiosity and the will and the willingness, and to have some discipline as well, to keep learning and to be looking for that in your life. I think it's important.
Lovely. So I would say to anyone who's interested in knowing more about conscientiology, discovering, learning more about their purpose, their consciousness, or their energy body, how to work with their energy, leaving the body, all that stuff. Obviously, Less Incomplete, the book, is a really good place to start, because as anyone can tell from you talking now and from the book, it's is a lovely clarity, and you're able to explain it to people, and I think people who are new to it can really get a sense of it. There's Paravision, which has very it's very kind of detailed text on the exercises, you can do to work with your energy and develop consciousness. And I just want to ask, you've already mentioned it a bit. What else are you up to at the moment, and where can people find you? You've got the big conference in Strasbourg.
Yes. So I'm based in Paris, as you know. I've been here for 5 years now, and a real focus for me today is to help establish conscientiology in France, and so we're starting to give courses and lectures and activities and so on in French. I think these ideas, there is of course interest here, but a lot of it is quite new in our approach to this country, and so this is the focus today, and also trying to help the other organisations in Brazil that are looking to internationalise, to give activities here in France and elsewhere in Europe as well. I mean, some of them are really fascinating, Ben. For example, there's an organisation called the International Organisation of Conscientiotherapy. So this is an organisation that applies all of the principles that we've talked about today: multidimensionality, Syriaxology, past lives, applying those principles to health. And so what you have there in Brazil is this organisation, people practicing, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and so on. For example, you can go there today, you can have counselling with 2 counsellors there. It's a very organised activity, but they'll look at your issue from a multidimensional perspective, from the perspective of past lives. Has this issue come from a past life, for example?
Yeah.
And so, they've come to Europe and given some lectures and activities as well. So this is hopefully what we can do more of going forwards in the future, help more of these organisations to come and do activities here in Europe.
Wonderful. And that sounds wonderful. And I'm also struck that conscientiology seems to attract a very broad range of practitioners, and it attracts a lot of scientists and also kind of psychologists. Would you say that's right? There's kind of across the spectrum.
People from all walks of life.
Yeah.
All walks of life. And it never ceases to fascinate me where all of these people come from and their backgrounds. A colleague who was here working with us to give some courses, who I met for the first time last year. He was a Brazilian who was a roadie working with rock bands in Australia.
Wow. Yeah.
Now here he is today, really one of the principal leaders of Consecutivis, coming here to France, teaching very precise methodologies to all of us, to help us to identify a previous personality in a past life. So look, Ben, there's no rule of thumb. People are coming from all different walks of life. The one thing that we understand is that it's not everybody who's interested in these topics. For a lot of people, it's outside of their realm of what they consider to be real.
Yeah.
So what we understand is that people who come with this openness and feel such an affinity, like you, for these ideas, it's probably because you have experience with all of these things already in past lives, maybe studied in between lives, and when you hear people talking about these topics in this life, in fact you're not learning anything new, you're just being reminded of something that you already know. So that was my case when I started studying these ideas in the UK, nearly 20 years ago. I thought, I've never heard so much common sense in my whole life. I just immediately felt very drawn to the work, and that's why I decided to become a volunteer and a teacher and to write the book and really get involved.
Lovely. That kind of coming home, that I'm at home in this information with this thing, is like it's somewhere in the past. I've known this already, kind of thing.
Yes, indeed.
Wonderful. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to make sure all the right links are down below, so if people want to contact you, find out more about these events, they can. And thank you, and I wish you the best, with Lesson Complete and your teaching and work.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, for inviting me on the program. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Have a great day.